Hello, welcome to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we will be reading 1 Samuel chapter 30. And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives were taken captives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, Shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those that were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which were so faint that they could not go over the brook Besor. And they found an Egyptian in the field, and brought him to David, and gave him bread. And he did eat, and they made him drink water. And they gave him a piece of a cake of figs, and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came again to him, for he had eaten no bread, nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. And David said unto him, To whom belongest thou? And whence art thou? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me, because 3 days agone I fell sick. We made an invasion upon the south of these Sherethites, and upon the coast which belongeth to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said to him, Canst thou bring me down to this company? And he said, Swear unto me by God, that thou wilt neither kill me, nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when he had brought him down, behold, they were spread abroad upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil that they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. And David smote them from the twilight even unto the evening of the next day, and there escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men, which rode upon camels and fled. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his two wives, and there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. No lacking. R.I.P. Little Mister. And David came to the 200 men, which were so faint that they could not follow David, whom they had made also to abide at the brook Besor. And they went forth to meet David and to meet the people that were with them. And when David came near to the people, he saluted them. Then answered all the wicked men and of Belial, of those that went with David, and said, Because they went not with us, we will not give them aught of the spoil that we have recovered, save to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. Then said David, Ye shall not do so, my brethren, with that which the Lord hath given us, who hath preserved us, and delivered the company that came against us into our hand. For who will hearken unto you in this matter? But as his part is that goeth down to the battle, so shall his part be that tarrieth by the stuff. They shall part alike. And it was so from that day forward that he made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel unto this day. And when David came to Ziklag, he sent of the spoil unto the elders of Judah, even to his friends, saying, Behold, a gift, or behold, a present for you of the spoil of the enemies of the Lord. And to them which were in Aroer, and to them which were in Siphmoth, and to them which were in Eshtoma, and to them which were in Rachal, and to them which were in the cities of the Jerahmeelites, and to them which were in the cities of the Kenites, and to them which were in Hormah, and to them which were in Chorajan, and to them which were in Atath. and to them which were in Hebron, and to all the places where David himself and his men were wont to haunt. In the previous chapter, 1 Samuel 29, the Philistines are preparing to war with Israel. King Achish expects David to participate on behalf of the Philistines. The other Philistine leaders do not trust David to be loyal in war against his own people, and Achish asks David to leave. 1 Samuel 30, our current chapter. After being sent away from war, David and his men return to find their families captured and their land destroyed. With the help of a servant that was left behind, they figure out the men who did this were the Amalekites. David and his men retrieve their goods and families and smite the Amalekites. Summarizing 1 Samuel chapter 30. So, the previous chapter, the king of Gath has allowed David to find refuge where he lives in the Philistine territory. And in chapter 27, verse 6, Ziklag is the place that he allowed David and his men to live in. In the last chapter, the Philistines go to war with the Israelites, and King Achish expects David to fight on the Philistines' behalf. The other leaders don't trust David, they don't trust that he's going to be loyal, and so they send David home. We're starting off when David and his men come back. They found that their town had been raided and burned to the ground. It says that they only carried off people, but they didn't kill anyone. However, David and his men wept. These men who were preparing to go to war, they cried for their family. They cried for their wives. I read where there's this in the comment section on something, there was another woman that said it makes her really sad when men cry because it's so hard for them to cry or they don't feel comfortable crying. So when they do cry, it's because they're really sad. And I feel like that too. When I see men crying about things, it's like they have to really hurt to actually cry. Even if he's mild mannered or he has a gentle temperament, it still takes a lot for him to cry. Particularly, I think, with Black men, it takes them a lot to cry. So when they cry, it's really a lot of pain there. Okay, so they wept until they could weep no more. David's 2 wives were taken captive, and now David is in danger because the men want to stone David. They're angry at him for this. Keep in mind, 1 Samuel 22, David has been fleeing for his life because Saul wants to kill him for being too good of an employee. So he had to leave and he didn't know where he was going to live. So he came and lived in a cave. And these men that are with him came to the cave with him in debt, unhappy. They probably don't have that many supportive things to say to him after he's been run off his job and home and marriage for being a good man. So now that he establishes himself in a different territory, he's going to be faithful and fight with the people who have given him home and protection. They begin to not trust him. And in their absence, because they had to go to war, they left everything unguarded, their families get taken. David asks Abiathar to bring him the ephod, the holy garment. So Abiathar brought it to him. David prays. He asks God, should I chase after the band of raiders? God says yes. You shall recover everything. So David and his men went out. Two of them became too exhausted to help. So David just continued with 400 men. Along the way, they found an Egyptian man. The Egyptian found, oh no, they found an Egyptian. They gave him bread and water. They began to talk to this Egyptian. And they say, "Who do you belong to? Where do you come from?" The guy tells him that he's an Egyptian. He's a slave of the Amalekite, and that he was abandoned because he got sick. The idea of someone who, this is their connection to society, is being a slave. So they basically work so they can live indoors and have meals. And if they get sick, then they're considered useless. So the Egyptian slave tells David what happened, that the Amalekites were raiding these other territories and burned Ziklag. And Ziklag is where David and his men were living. David asked, "Will you help lead them?" One thing that it made me question here is like, how did you know where to start looking? Maybe there's a path of destruction, or a path where you can see where chariots left in the dirt or something. But it just did make me wonder, like, how do they know where to start going? Anyways, after they meet the slave tells them who did this. They ask, "Will you help me? Will you help us find the Amalekites?" They said, "Okay, if you swear not to harm me or turn me in." So they led David and his men to the Amalekites, and the Amalekites were celebrating, drinking and dancing with joy because of the amount of plunder they had taken. So in verse 17, David and his men smote them. From the entire next day, only 400 men escaped on camels. David recovered everything. The Amalekites, you know, absolutely no lacking. That comes from the Bible as well. No lacking. Um, he brought everything back: flocks, plunder, and the women and children. David returned to the brook, the 200 men that stayed behind. And it says the men, some evil troublemakers. And this is something that I noticed. Like, sometimes people, when they have to go through a lot for something, they want to make sure that everyone else that gets the same thing that they get has to go through the same amount of crap. That's like, God, I've seen that attitude at church. I've seen it at church. I've seen that at work. I've seen it at school. If it takes one person a lot to get something, they don't want the next person to have it any easier. And that's not what Christ did. Christ was beaten beyond recognition for our sins, and he gives us salvation freely. All you have to do is believe it. So, in my opinion, that is not a reflection of God to have people work really hard if you can make things easier. And that's what happened here. The men that stayed behind, David made sure that they received some of the plunder. He made sure that other men, the elders of Judah, part of the plunder, sent gifts to the other peoples. That was David's nature. Even though David is being hunted, he still has the goodwill to say, you know what, I don't have to make it just as hard for everyone around me to receive something good. I am so interested in what kind of king he's going to be, but it is taking like a long time for him to even get out of being hunted by Saul, but not to worry. Or Saul is going to die in the next chapter, Saul and his sons. So we have one more chapter left, and then we'll be in 2 Samuel. Thank you for clicking on the video. I hope you consider commenting, subscribing. I love you. Remember, God sees all.